Thank you, Mr. Oberstar, and I look forward to working with you. And one of our responsibilities is to learn from tragedies, to learn from disasters, and to make certain that we put positive measures in place to make certain that they don't happen. Again, now we can't bring back the loss of 11 lives, but people who have lost lives or property or their business, their opportunity to earn a living in this country or in the areas affected need our assistance, and we need to make certain that we have measures in place to assist those folks that are hurting now. Let me just say we will be doing legislation. I'm told that the leadership has made a decision to have legislation before the 4th of July recess. I look forward to cooperating in a bipartisan effort to make certain that we have, again, in place measures that will assist folks. And this committee does have jurisdiction, checked it over all liability questions dealing with this matter, and the legislation Mr. Oberstar outlined, including a national response plan in addition to the liability question. And I think that that Mr. Oberstar has also brought some things forth that he didn't talk about them a great deal in public today, but I think I concur with him. And we need to look at eliminating some of the self-certifying that the industry has done. I'll talk about that in a second. But I didn't know too much about how the fund worked. I knew we had one in place. Mr. Oberstar is correct. If you want to put the oil spill liability trust fund slide up there, if we've got that, the trust fund is between $1.5 and $1.6 billion. Do we have that, folks?
They're working on getting it up.
Well, this was set up some time ago, as you heard the history of, I think, back in 1990. It was adjusted in 2006 and it's about $1.5 to $1.6 billion balance in the fund. The thing that is interesting, I said, well, what about people who are hurting? Are they getting compensation, the ones that have economic damage? And the answer to me was, the response to me was no. I said, well, what about this emergency fund of $150 million? And I was told that that's being used right now. And in fact, this $150 million emergency fund, they told me, is just about expired. So my question is, where did the money go? Well, it's being spent to pay for operational funds, for some cleanup costs, and for some other items. None of it goes to economic damages at this point. Now, the poor son of a gun that's been hurt by this has to put an application into BP first, I guess, and get refused before they're eligible. Now, the funds, I'm told, is already expired, so I said, I'll introduce legislation to expand it because we need to have funds available immediately, and I'll support that, Mr. Oberstar.
Gentleman, you?
Yeah.
The fund, it's not an emergency fund. It's a limit in the oil spill liability to $100 million per incident, and the Coast Guard has drawn up to that. So we need to change that cap and give them more authority.
Exactly, and I have no problem with that. But listen to this. That money is all the responsibility of BP. Is there anybody here who doesn't know who's responsible for this spill? Raise your hand if you don't know who's responsible for the spill. The government and the taxpayers, or people have been paying the 8 cents on a barrel, have put the money into this fund, and we are front financing BP's responsibility. So I'm fine with opening this up, but the first thing the government needs to do is get some payments from BP and responsible parties so that we are just doing this to front finance their responsibility. In this, we should never let BP off the hook. or responsible parties off the hook. But in the process of changing things, you know, you don't want to do damage, or you don't want to help the reward offenders and penalize people who've done the responsible thing. So that's the first item. Now, of course, on the other side of the aisle, the first thing they do is we have to raise taxes or fees. It's now 8 cents per barrel fee that got us to this 1.6 billion, 1.5 billion. There are some other fines and penalties in there, but for the most part, it's at 8 cents. So what did the other side propose? In fact, they passed it in legislation last week that we increase this to 34 cents. Now, I don't mind increasing it, but I'll tell you one thing. I'm not going to pay BP's expenses up front from this fund. They should be held responsible, or responsible parties pay for that. So we may need to adjust this upwards, and I have no problem with that. The Senate has a proposal for 41 cents per barrel. But what we've got to do is get the right figure and still hold people responsible, not use this fund to let people off the hook. The other thing, too, is we need to find some way to allow those who are affected by economic damage, their business closed down, their job lost, their resort activity or tourist income killed by this disaster, that they get some immediate relief, not going through some bureaucratic thing. So don't think, folks, that those people are being helped in this situation right off. So that's the first caveat that I have. Economic damages, we now have the $75 million cap. And I say it's fine to raise that. But what we've got to do is be careful that we don't raise it and have unintended consequences. When you raise the cap too high, what happens? Small business people, small operators cannot get the insurance. They cannot meet the liability limits. So what do? You reward the big companies. Put the second slide up there, the one on the number of spills. Okay. The number of wells, I'm sorry, number of wells. This is interesting, and this was actually put by the majority staff into the report that they provided. And I want to tell the majority staff you did a very good job. It was 29 pages. It was one of the most thorough reports I've read the committee produced, Mr. Chairman. But this is interesting, and what we want to do if we raise again the liability on the economic front, we don't want to put everybody out of business. We don't want to make only the big operators protected and put everybody else out of business, because I come from a business background. If you can't get insurance, if you can't meet these liability caps as a small business person, I wouldn't be able to compete. Now, we don't have that many that we have to worry about in deep water. If you look at the chart, and most of the wells and the activity, the drilling, is done under 600 feet. Look at that. It's almost 3,500. So what we want to do is target and keep responsible those people who are posing the biggest risk and also would have the biggest resources and should be held on the liability issue responsible financially. One other point that I want to make on this, Mr. Chairman, as we do this, last week the administration had 3 different positions on moratoriums on drilling. Did you watch that? And it threw everybody into a panic. Actually, some people are out of business as a result of just a few days of uncertainty in this market. And what we've got to do is make certain that we don't have the same kind of havoc when we go forward with these liability proposals. Again, not letting anyone off the hook, making certain they're held responsible. Finally, let me just say, Thad Allen, who's in charge, He was recently quoted, we'll put this in the record, May 24th, when he asked why doesn't the government take this cleanup over. He was very frank. Thad Ellen is a great guy, and we're fortunate to have him in charge. He said, because the government doesn't have any capability. Now, probably the worst thing the administration could have done is on June 1st, they sent the Attorney General, Eric Holder, down there, and Eric Holder said he's going to launch a criminal investigation. I submit that what he did is probably, he probably put the biggest damper on the cleanup you could possibly do. If you're in small business or in business and you're needed or going to be contracted to be involved in the cleanup, and the first thing they do is send in the attorneys and the Attorney General to start threatening people that they're looking at criminal activity there, that's going to get people out of that business of cleanup and activity. I think where they need to start, and there may be a time for that, and I want people held criminally responsible. But right now we need to get that cleaned up. Finally, there's one other point that I think we should do in cleaning that up now. This is a report that we had, I guess it's in Newsweek, June 7th. You need to start with the Minerals Management Office in the Department of Interior. Let me just read this, and if Eric Holder wants to investigate, it says that MMS appears to have had a coziness, sometimes creepy corruption activities, and we saw 3 criminal investigations in that department, which I submitted evidence to under the Bush administration. It says oil companies filled out inspection forms in pencil, and then the Department of Interior official, the inspector, traced over their writings in ink. Now, there's a place to start investigating, start looking at criminal activity, is our own Department of Interior that issued the permit, that set the parameters for drilling, and then penciled in their opinion on what was done in inspections. Something's rotten in Denmark and also in oil drilling and the Department of Interior, and that's a good place for Eric Holder to start. Yield back the balance of my time.
Thanks.